You have spent years working to see more clearly. You have meditated, reflected, questioned your assumptions, examined your patterns. You have done exactly what the books and teachers told you to do. You have become more aware, more conscious, more lucid about how the world actually works and who you actually are. And now, sitting with this hard-won clarity, you notice something disturbing. You are not happier. In fact, you are less happy than you were before you started this whole journey. The people around you, the ones who never question anything, who live in what you now recognize as comfortable illusions, they seem fine. They laugh easily. They enjoy simple pleasures. They do not carry this weight you carry, this burden of seeing. You watch them at parties, at work, in their relationships, and there is something you have lost that they still possess. A lightness, an ability to just be without the constant awareness of being. You thought consciousness was supposed to liberate you, but instead it has isolated you. You thought awareness would bring peace, but it has brought a kind of perpetual disquiet. And the most troubling part is that you cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot return to the innocent state you once inhabited. You are awake, and being awake turns out to be exhausting and lonely and somehow less joyful than the dream you escaped. This is not what anyone told you would happen. The spiritual literature speaks of bliss and liberation and transcendence, but what you are experiencing feels more like a slow erosion of the capacity for simple happiness. Something has shifted, and you do not know if it was worth it. What you are experiencing is real, and it is not a failure of your practice or your understanding. It is a stage that almost everyone who genuinely wakes up must pass through, though few speak honestly about it. Lucidity, real lucidity, not the Instagram version but the actual seeing of how things are, carries a cost that is rarely acknowledged in spiritual circles. To be lucid is to see through the performances that constitute most of social life. You recognize when someone is speaking from fear rather than honesty. You notice the mechanisms of ego at work in yourself and others. You see how much of what passes for connection is actually just mutual use, how much of what appears as meaning is actually just distraction, how much of happiness is simply the temporary forgetting of unhappiness. This seeing cannot be turned off. Once you have genuinely understood something about the nature of suffering or desire or identity, you carry that understanding with you always. And this understanding, paradoxically, often makes you less functional in the world that runs on not understanding these things. Consider what happens when you become lucid about social interaction. You begin to notice the scripts people follow, the predictable patterns of conversation, the ways individuals present carefully curated versions of themselves. You see the performance, the anxiety beneath the confidence, the need for validation driving what appears as generosity. And once you see this, you cannot participate in the same unconscious way. When someone tells a story to make themselves look good, you hear it differently. When someone offers help, you might notice the subtle expectation of reciprocation. This does not mean people are bad or that connection is impossible. It simply means you are aware of layers that others are not attending to, but this awareness creates distance. You find yourself observing rather than participating, analyzing rather than feeling. The spontaneity that makes social life pleasurable begins to disappear. You become, in a sense, too conscious for the unconscious flow of ordinary human interaction. And since most of life is lived in this realm of unconscious social participation, you find yourself feeling alienated from the very fabric of shared existence. The same thing happens with your own experience. You become aware of your own mechanisms. You notice when you are seeking validation, when you are performing rather than being, when you are constructing narratives about yourself to avoid discomfort. This self-knowledge was supposed to free you, and in some sense it does. You are less controlled by unconscious patterns, but it also means you can no longer lose yourself in the moment. There is always a part of you watching, noting, analyzing. When you feel happy, you are aware of feeling happy, which creates a subtle distance from the happiness itself. When you are angry, you see the anger as a passing state rather than identifying with it completely, which is psychologically healthy, but somehow makes the emotion feel less real, less yours. You have gained the capacity to witness your own experience, but the price is that you are no longer fully immersed in it. And immersion, that quality of being so absorbed in something that you forget yourself entirely, turns out to be essential to a certain kind of happiness. The happiness you have lost is the happiness of complete absorption, of being so involved in what you are doing or feeling that there is no separation between you and the experience. Lucidity, by its very nature, creates separation. It inserts consciousness between you and your life. If this perspective is opening something up for you, consider subscribing. I explore these territories every week, and I would love to have you along for the journey. Now we must ask the difficult question: if lucidity leads to unhappiness, should we seek to become less lucid? Should we try to return to the unconscious state? This is not actually possible, even if it were desirable. Consciousness, once it has expanded, does not contract back to its previous boundaries. You cannot unknow what you have learned. You cannot unsee what you have seen. Attempts to return to naivety only produce a kind of false naivety, a performance of not knowing that is more painful than the knowing itself. But the deeper issue is that the question itself reveals a misunderstanding about what lucidity actually is and what it might become. What you are calling lucidity right now is more accurately described as incomplete lucidity. It is awareness without the capacity to hold what is being seen. It is consciousness that has developed the ability to perceive, but not yet the capacity to integrate what it perceives. Think of it like developing night vision, but being overwhelmed by everything you can suddenly see in the darkness. The seeing itself is not the problem. The problem is that your system has not yet adapted to operating at this level of seeing. When you first become lucid about the performative nature of social life, about the mechanisms of ego, about the constructed nature of selfhood, this knowledge feels like a burden because you are still relating to life from a framework that assumed these things were solid and real. You saw social connection as something genuine, and now you see it as performance, and this feels like a loss. But this is only a problem because you are caught between two different ways of being. You no longer believe in the naive version, but you have not yet discovered what genuine connection looks like when you see through the performance. You are in transition, and transition is always uncomfortable. The unhappiness of lucid people is often the unhappiness of being between states, of having deconstructed the old framework but not yet constructed or discovered a new one. You are like someone who has learned that Santa Claus is not real, but has not yet learned what Christmas can mean for an adult. The childhood magic is gone, and the adult meaning has not yet emerged. What I am describing here is something Hannah Arendt understood deeply when she wrote about the life of the mind. Thinking, real thinking, is not a comfortable activity. It pulls you out of the flow of unreflective action. It makes you question what everyone else takes for granted. It isolates you because most people are not interested in the questions that thinking reveals. Arendt wrote about how Socrates was killed, not for his answers, but for his questions, for the way his thinking disrupted the comfortable certainties of Athenian life. To think is to be in some sense at odds with the world as it is. But Arendt also understood that thinking is essential to being fully human, that the unexamined life is not worth living, not because it is immoral, but because it is not really lived. It is merely a sequence of reactions and habits and inherited patterns. The person who does not think is not really present to their own existence. They are living on autopilot. So the question is not whether to think or to be conscious, because once you have started, you cannot stop. The question is how to think, how to be conscious, in a way that does not collapse into permanent alienation and unhappiness. I know many of you watching this have never told anyone what you are really experiencing. You have been carrying this alone, maybe for years, wondering if something is fundamentally broken in you. Everyone else seems fine, and you are over here unable to enjoy the things that used to bring you joy, unable to participate in life with the ease you once had. But here is what I want you to understand. The moment you name this, the moment you acknowledge it out loud, even just in a comment, something shifts. You stop being alone with it. So let me ask you directly, how long have you been feeling this way? When did you first notice that becoming more aware was making you less happy? I want you to share in the comments, not because I need engagement, but because someone else watching this needs to see your words. They need to know they are not the only one experiencing this paradox. And if you cannot find the words right now, if it feels too heavy to articulate, just type this: I see this too. That is it, just those 4 words. Because when you do, you create permission for dozens of others to say it too. Your honesty, your willingness to be seen in your struggle, it helps break the silence that keeps all of us isolated in this experience. So comment below. Tell me where you are in this. I read every single one, and I promise you, you are not alone in what you are feeling. The way forward is not to become less lucid, but to become more lucid, to complete the transition that your current unhappiness signals has begun but not finished. Right now you are lucid about certain things but not others. You can see through social performance, but you have not yet seen through your own investment in authenticity as a superior alternative. You can see through ego mechanisms, but you have not yet seen through the ego that prides itself on seeing through ego mechanisms. You are aware of the constructed nature of selfhood, but you are still operating from an assumed self that is doing the seeing. This is why the unhappiness persists. You are still relating to lucidity as if it is something you possess, something that makes you different from or better than those who lack it. But this is just another form of identity, another performance, another way the self tries to establish itself. True lucidity would include being lucid about lucidity itself, seeing through the trap of consciousness, taking pride in its own consciousness. What does this fuller lucidity look like? It is not something I can give you as a formula or a technique, because that would turn it into another thing to achieve, another level to attain, and we would be right back in the seeking that prevents finding. But I can point to certain characteristics. Fuller lucidity includes the recognition that the performances you see in others are not different in kind from your own activities. Everyone is performing always, including you in your role as the one who sees through performances. There is no authentic self hiding beneath the performance waiting to be revealed. There is only performance all the way down, and once you see this, the judgment falls away. You are not above the game watching from outside. You are in the game, and knowing you are in the game does not remove you from it. This is crucial. The unhappiness comes from thinking that lucidity places you outside, that seeing the mechanisms means you are not subject to them. But this is an illusion. You are just as caught in patterns as everyone else. The only difference is you are aware of being caught, and this awareness itself becomes another thing to be caught in. Fuller lucidity also includes a recognition that the naive happiness you lost was not actually as valuable as you now think it was. Memory distorts things. You remember the ease of unconscious living, but forget its poverty, its repetitiveness, its ultimate emptiness. You remember being able to laugh easily, but forget how that laughter covered over deeper questions you were not asking. What you are really mourning is not happiness but ignorance, and while ignorance has certain comforts, it also has limitations that you could not see from inside it. You could not see how much of your previous life was driven by fear, by seeking approval, by trying to become something rather than being what you are. You could not see how much energy you spent maintaining illusions about yourself and others. The loss of these illusions feels like loss, but it is also a kind of freedom, even if that freedom is not yet producing the joy you expected. And this points to the deepest realization. The unhappiness you are experiencing is not actually caused by lucidity itself, but by the expectation that lucidity should produce happiness. You undertook this journey with a goal, even if that goal was unconscious. You wanted to become free, peaceful, joyful, liberated. And every spiritual teaching you encountered reinforced this expectation. Enlightenment is bliss. Awakening is liberation. Consciousness brings peace. But these promises are, in most cases, more about marketing than truth. They are designed to motivate you to practice, to keep seeking, to buy the next book or attend the next retreat. The reality is that consciousness for its own sake, seeing clearly for its own sake, does not guarantee any particular emotional state. It makes you more honest, more aware, more present to what is actually happening, but it does not make you happy in the way you imagined, and the suffering comes from the gap between what you expected and what you found. What if happiness is not actually the goal? What if happiness, that feeling of ease and pleasure and contentment, is just another state that comes and goes like all states? What if the real shift is not from unhappy unconsciousness to happy consciousness, but from seeking happiness to no longer needing any particular state to be different than it is? This is difficult to grasp because it sounds like resignation, like giving up on feeling good. But it is not that. It is something stranger and more subtle. It is the recognition that the endless pursuit of pleasant states, even the pleasant state called enlightenment or liberation or awakening, is itself what creates suffering. The lucid person who is unhappy because they thought lucidity would solve the problem of being human, would finally deliver them into a state where everything is okay. And lucidity does not do this. It reveals that there is no such state. Or rather, it reveals that okay is already here, not as a feeling but as the basic condition of being alive, and that this okay does not depend on feeling happy or unhappy or lucid or confused or anything else. This is where the real transformation happens, not in becoming more conscious, but in stopping the search for something other than what consciousness reveals. Right now, you are conscious, but you are fighting with your consciousness. You see clearly, but you wish you saw something else. You are aware, but you resent what awareness shows you. This fighting, this resistance, this subtle arguing with what is, this is what makes consciousness burdensome. Imagine if instead of resisting what you see, you simply saw it. Instead of wishing people were more authentic, you simply noticed the performance without judgment. Instead of being disturbed by your own patterns, you simply observed them with curiosity. Instead of feeling isolated by your awareness, you recognized that awareness itself is not separate from life, but is the way life knows itself through this particular nervous system. The burden is not in the seeing, but in the relationship to the seeing, in the story about how seeing should feel different than it does. The lucid people who remain unhappy are those who have developed consciousness, but not equanimity. They can see, but they cannot let be. They understand intellectually, but they have not softened into understanding. They know that the self is constructed, but they still protect it fiercely. They recognize that most of life is performance, but they still judge themselves and others for performing. The development of consciousness, without the development of acceptance, creates a particular kind of hell. You are aware enough to see what is wrong, but not wise enough to stop fighting with it. You are conscious enough to feel alienated, but not integrated enough to be okay with the alienation. You are lucid enough to lose your illusions, but not mature enough to live without them gracefully. What would it mean to be both lucid and happy? Not happy in the naive sense, not the happiness of not knowing, but something else. Perhaps contentment is a better word. Or peace. Or simply being okay with what is. This does not mean you stop seeing clearly. You still notice the performance. You still recognize patterns. You still understand the mechanisms of suffering. But you stop making these observations mean something about you. You stop using your lucidity as proof that you are broken, or that the world is broken, or that something has gone wrong. You see what is and you let it be what it is, and somewhere in that letting be, the struggle dissolves. Not because circumstances have changed, but because the argument with circumstances has ended. You are still lucid, perhaps more lucid than before, but the lucidity is no longer in service of becoming something. It is simply how you relate to experience, clear, present, aware, but not at war. If what I am sharing here resonates with something you have been feeling, something you have not quite been able to name, then I want you to know you are not alone in this. There are many of us exploring these questions, sitting with these uncomfortable truths, learning to see in new ways. I create these videos for people who are ready to go deeper, who are not satisfied with surface answers, who want to understand rather than just feel better temporarily. If that is you, consider subscribing, not because you need another channel to follow, but because this journey of understanding yourself, of waking up to what is real, it helps to have companions along the way. People who will not offer you easy fixes, but will sit with you in the questions. I will be here every week with another exploration, another perspective, another thread to pull on. And I would be honored to have you here as part of this community of seekers and thinkers. So if this feels right, hit that subscribe button, and if you found value in this particular exploration, let me know in the comments what resonated most with you. Your reflections often illuminate things I had not considered. There is something else that must be said about lucid unhappiness. It is often a transitional state, but it can also become chronic if you do not understand what is happening. Some people become addicted to their own clarity, to the role of being the one who sees through things. This becomes its own trap. You develop an identity around being conscious, around being awake, around being the person who knows better. And this identity, like all identities, must be defended and maintained. You find yourself needing to demonstrate your lucidity, to point out illusions, to show others that you see what they do not see. This is exhausting and isolating, and it creates a particular kind of arrogance disguised as humility. You tell yourself you are just being honest, just seeing clearly, but underneath there is often judgment, superiority, a subtle pride in being more aware than those around you. And this pride makes connection impossible, because real connection requires meeting people where they are, not where you think they should be. It requires recognizing that your clarity is not inherently more valuable than their confusion, that your consciousness is not better than their unconsciousness, that you are not ahead of anyone on some imaginary spiritual hierarchy. The other danger is that lucidity without love becomes cold. You see clearly, but you do not feel deeply. You understand patterns, but you have lost touch with the raw immediacy of being alive. You analyze everything but experience nothing fully. This is not real lucidity. This is dissociation masquerading as awareness. Real lucidity includes the full spectrum of human experience. It does not exclude emotion or passion or messiness. It does not require you to be calm and detached all the time. It simply means you know what you are experiencing while you are experiencing it. You can be angry and lucid. You can be in love and lucid. You can be confused and lucid. Lucidity is not a state. It is a quality of attention. And this quality of attention should make you more alive, not less. If your consciousness has made you numb, if your awareness has created emotional distance, then something has gone wrong in how you are relating to awareness. You have turned consciousness into a defense mechanism, a way to avoid feeling too much, and this is the opposite of what consciousness should do. So how do you move from unhappy lucidity to something else? Not by trying to be happier, because that just creates another project, another seeking, another way to be dissatisfied with what is. The shift happens when you stop treating your lucidity as a problem to be solved or a state to be transcended. You are lucid. This is your current way of being in the world. And within that lucidity, within that clear seeing, there is room for everything. There is room for sadness, for joy, for confusion, for peace. The lucidity does not determine what you feel. It is simply the space in which feelings arise and pass. When you recognize this, when you stop expecting lucidity to produce any particular state, the burden lifts. You can see clearly and be sad. You can understand patterns and still be surprised by life. You can recognize performance and still enjoy connection. The seeing and the living are not separate. They are the same process, and trying to get the seeing to produce a particular kind of living is what creates the split, the alienation, the unhappiness. Let me be specific about what this looks like in practice. You are at a party, and you notice the social dynamics, the way people present themselves, the subtle negotiations for status and approval. In your current state, this awareness makes you feel isolated. You are observing rather than participating, and you feel separate from the ease everyone else seems to have. But what if, instead of making this mean something about you or them, you simply noticed it and continued to engage? What if you participated fully while being aware of participating? This is not pretending. It is not going back to unconsciousness. It is being conscious and engaged simultaneously. You see the performance, but you perform anyway, because all human interaction is performance. And there is nothing wrong with that. The performance is not fake unless you believe there is some authentic self that should be appearing instead. But there is no such self. There is only this responding, this engaging, this being with others in whatever way is happening. The lucidity adds a quality of freedom to the participation because you know you are performing and you choose to do it anyway, not out of fear or need, but simply because this is what humans do together. The same principle applies to your inner experience. You notice you are seeking validation. In your current state, this awareness might make you feel bad about yourself. You think you should be beyond seeking validation, that your lucidity should have freed you from such needs. But what if you simply notice the seeking without judgment? What if you recognize that seeking validation is something nervous systems do, that it is part of how humans orient themselves in social space, and that being aware of it does not mean it goes away? You can be conscious of seeking validation and still seek it. The consciousness does not remove the pattern. It simply means you are not unconsciously driven by it. There is a quality of choice that emerges, not because you become free from the pattern, but because you see the pattern clearly enough to work with it rather than being worked by it. This is a subtle but important distinction. Lucidity does not free you from being human. It changes your relationship to being human. What you are ultimately dealing with is the gap between the promise of spiritual awakening and the reality of consciousness. The promise says that waking up will solve your problems, make you happy, give you peace. The reality is that consciousness simply makes you more conscious. It does not solve anything. It reveals what is actually happening, and what is actually happening is that life is difficult, and people suffer and nothing lasts, and all meaning is constructed, and the self is a process, not a thing. These are not happy realizations. They are honest realizations. And honesty does not produce happiness. It produces clarity. And within that clarity, if you stop arguing with what clarity reveals, there can be a kind of peace. Not the peace of having arrived somewhere, but the peace of no longer needing to arrive. Not the peace of feeling good, but the peace of being okay with however you feel. Not the peace of having figured it all out, but the peace of being willing to not know. The lucid people who find something beyond unhappiness are those who have stopped using their lucidity to compare themselves to others or to some imaginary ideal of how a conscious person should be. They see clearly, but they do not weaponize their seeing. They understand patterns, but they remain curious. They recognize illusions, but they are not bitter about being disillusioned. They have, in a sense, become ordinary again. Not unconsciously ordinary, not the ordinariness of not knowing, but the ordinariness of knowing and still being here, still doing the laundry and making dinner and having conversations and feeling things and living a life that does not look particularly special from the outside. This is the great anti-climax of spiritual development. You work so hard to wake up, and when you finally do, you discover that being awake looks a lot like being asleep, except now you know you are doing it. The magical transformation you expected does not happen. You are still you, still dealing with the same basic challenges of being human, still subject to mood and circumstance and all the forces that shape a life. But there is a quality of ease that was not there before, a quality of being fundamentally okay with the whole mess of it. So if you are lucid and unhappy, understand that this is not where the story ends. It is a chapter, an important chapter, but not the conclusion. The unhappiness is trying to tell you something. It is showing you that you are still seeking, still wanting something from consciousness that consciousness cannot give you. It is revealing that you have expectations about how lucidity should feel, and these expectations are in conflict with how lucidity actually feels. And the resolution is not to become more lucid or less lucid, but to stop having the expectation in the first place. To be lucid for its own sake, not for what it will get you. To see clearly without needing the seeing to produce any particular result. To be conscious simply because this is what you are, not because it will make you better or happier or more peaceful or anything else. When consciousness stops being a means to an end and becomes simply what is happening, the burden transforms. The seeing remains, perhaps becomes even clearer, but the weight dissolves. You are still lucid, you still see through things, but you are no longer carrying lucidity as something separate from living. It is simply how living is occurring through you. And in that integration, that lack of split between seeing and being, there is room for happiness again. Not the naive happiness you lost, but something quieter, more durable, less dependent on circumstances. A basic okayness with being alive and aware, even when awareness reveals things you would rather not see.